and Wisdom. I'm Dr. David Breeden, the Senior Minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, and this is a humanist perspective on theological questions. This week, I do want to start asking a little bit about the tragic vision that is often talked about Americans lack. Why do we lack a tragic vision? And the first person really to say this was Reinhold Niebuhr. One of his famous sayings is that man's capacity for justice makes democracy possible. Man's capacity for injustice makes democracy necessary. And yes, Reinhold Niebuhr was very into the idea of original sin and that people are just not all that good at base. As a matter of fact, another of his famous sayings is, man is his own most vexing problem. Well, yeah, Reinhold may be right about that. We want to think about it. Reinhold Niebuhr, who lived from 1892 to 1971, is considered by many people to be America's greatest theologian ever. Well, how come? Well, the fact that he dealt with some very important connections between individual morality and social government moralities. For example, one book is The Irony of Barack Obama. Barack Obama, Reinhold Niebuhr, and the Problem of Christian Statecraft. No, the two never met. Barack Obama read Niebuhr, specifically the book, The Irony of American History, and really drew a lot of lessons from Niebuhr. And Obama's not the only one. James Comey, what Comey learned from theologian Reinhold Niebuhr about ethical leadership. Or this one, Reinhold Niebuhr, Washington's favorite theologian. How come he is Washington's favorite theologian, even long after he's gone? Well, one reason is that he stays in the news and in the theological realm and the political realm. Cornel West, probably one of the greatest living theologians, looks back to Niebuhr as one of his inspirations. Well, what about this guy? Well, he attended Elmhurst College in Illinois back in 1910, and then Eden Theological Seminary in St. Louis, Missouri in 1913, and he got a Bachelor of Divinity degree in 1914 from Yale and a master's in 1915. He was then ordained into the Evangelical Synod in 1915. Yes, even though his name, Reinhold Niebuhr, sure sounds like he was a German, he was born just a little bit west of St. Louis, Missouri, here in the United States, to German-speaking immigrant parents. He grew up speaking German and didn't learn English until he began attending school. The dates are important, notice, because this is leading up to the First World War here in the United States. He attended Bethel Evangelical Church in Detroit from 1915 to 1928 as the senior minister there. During that time period in Detroit, of course, that is the great explosion of automobile industry in the Detroit area. And the great engineer of all of that was Henry Ford. And Reinhold Niebuhr was both a pacifist during the First World War, not very popular, especially if you had some German ties. He was also a social gospel socialist, and I've talked quite a bit about the social gospel and the history of that on Coffee and Wisdom. You can find those online. And he took on Henry Ford, who was really kind of the hero of the hour. But he was accusing Henry Ford of setting up labor practices that were damaging to the souls of his workers. He left pastoral ministry in 1928 to teach at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. He became the professor of applied Christianity, and he retired from there in 1960. So very much the public intellectual from 1928 until 1960. In 1932, he published his first major book. And in that book, he announced a decisive break with liberal Christianity and liberalism in general. Cornel West calls the book the most important work in theology in U.S. history, and it's called Moral Man and Immoral Society, a study in ethics and politics. Yes, sexist language, it's an old book. I'm going to be dealing this week with a version from the 1930s that I happen to have. And then next week, I'll be looking at the introduction that Cornel West gave later to the book as he was grappling with it and its continuing influence long after Reinhold Niebuhr has left the scene. Well, what does the book say? The preface, he says this: the central thesis was and is that the liberal movement, both religious and secular, seemed to be unconscious of the basic difference between the morality of individuals and the morality of collectives, whether races, classes, or nations. And that is indeed the central thesis and what makes this book so important. Reinhold Niebuhr is saying that there is a vast difference between personal morality and cultural national morality. And even though we may have moral individuals all working in concert together, what we're going to get at the other end of that as a collective society is considerably less than the morality or the ethics of one person. That's the kind of idea that's going on here. I'll be talking more about that on Thursday as we delve into this very, very important and ultimately liberal / conservative, not really in the boxes that we even imagine anymore, Reinhold Niebuhr. Thanks for listening today. This is Coffee and Wisdom. If you've got questions or comments, you can join us live on Fridays at 9 a.m. Central Time. Email me, minister@firstunitarian.org, and I will be very happy to send you the Zoom link for that, or ask me a question. I'm always glad to hear from folks. I'll see you next time. Thank you.